I'm Mark Ryan, this is Super Review, and this is the Hisenior Mega5-EST, or as some are beginning to call it, the MegaFEST. And apologies, I hope you forgive me if I continue to call this thing the MegaFEST because it's a lot easier to say than its actual name. Now, what this is a relatively new IEM. It came out within the last year. It is a tribrid IEM. It's got two balanced armatures, two ESTs, one dynamic driver, hence 5 drivers. And this thing has been been on a slow boil in terms of hype buildup. Like late last year, people were asking me to review this thing on the strength of its graph, and it does graph quite well. We'll talk about that. In fact, I guess I'll just say up front, this thing has got, in my opinion, some of the best tuning of any IEM I've ever heard. No joke. But I didn't get a hold of it last year as much as I wanted to until earlier this year in CanJam in New York. There were a couple of people that asked me about the MegaFEST, including DMS, who's recently very positively reviewed it. And so fortunately, I was able to get a hold of the MegaFEST, and I've spent the last few weeks listening to this thing, comparing it with some other IEMs in its price range. And now on that note, just kind of a quick, this is interesting to me about the MegaFEST, is that the price on this is not super cheap, but for a tribrid, it's about what you would expect, around $550, $550. What's interesting to me about that is that price range around $400 to $600 has been a little bit vacant. Like there's been the Moondrop variations, there's the Dunu SA6, but it hasn't really been that contested until recently. And the MegaFEST being in the mix, I think it's quite fitting that this is, in my opinion, kind of reestablishing this price range. But anyway, that is neither here nor there. We're going to get into the review. I'm gonna tell you about the physical stuff, what I like about it, physical, form factor, fit, comfort, what comes in the box, all that stuff. Then we're gonna talk about the sound, and I'm gonna bring in some direct competitors for comparison's sake, so you know kind of exactly where this thing fits in. And like I've already kind of alluded to, this thing has got top tier tuning. This thing is an IEM I like quite a bit, but exactly how much? Well, that's what we're going to talk about. So without further ado, a quick shout out to Hisenior for sending this guy in for review. If you want to check out the MegaFEST, I've got it linked in the description down below. But otherwise, let's take a look at what you get inside the box, the packaging. And this is the packaging that I got with the MegaFEST. This is the apparently 7th anniversary edition. There's a different version of this as well, but this is the version I've got. It's got this slogan, "Feel the beauty of sound." So if you see this abbreviation here, PHEBOS, it's even on the IEMs themselves, PHEBOS. That's what it means, feel the beauty of sound, all right? A little bit on the cringe side, but not so bad, I suppose. But what you get inside the box, you get a nice little microfiber towel. I appreciate that. You get a carry case, which is, it's a little bit extra, right? This is like a Pelican style case. It seems like it's waterproof. If you go river rafting with your IEMs, something like this will probably be pretty good. It's got a little space specifically for the earpieces, the cable, and then all of your ear tips and other accessories. Personally, I don't river raft with my IEM, so I find a case like this to be a little overkill, a little bit bigger than I would ever use. Struggling to close it because it's so watertight. But yeah, it's a little bit extra for me. I'm sure somebody will appreciate that. Apart from that, you get a plethora of ear tips. And I think it's nice that they include so many different ear tips, including 2 different styles of silicone fit tips. So this is sort of a shorter umbrella, and this is a more typical fitting silicone ear tip to come in different sizes, of course, so you can find out what works for you. And of course, it also comes with foam tips. And I think that I say this all the time, I think it's important when you get a new IEM, try on a bunch of different ear tips. I know like a lot of people will go in with the preconception, I always wear medium ear tips, and they just go straight to the mediums or larges or whatever it is that usually works for you. And that's okay. But I do recommend to try not just all the sizes that come with a particular earphone, but also try multiple different types of ear tips that you have from other earphones, because a lot of the times the one that'll fit you the best and sound the best for you isn't necessarily the one that comes inside the box. And for me, here it was with the AudioSense. I believe they're called the A400 is the name of this ear tip. Nothing special about this ear tip in particular, but it worked out well for me. So that's going to lead us into talking about the earphone itself, and I'll push these accessories to the sides and make room to talk about the build quality here on the MegaFEST. And we'll start with this cable, which is a very, very handsome cable. Pretty happy with this cable from most perspectives, except for one really big one. We'll leave that for later. But you can see the behavior on it is really quite nice. It's maybe a little bit memory prone, but that's a large part just because I haven't really been using this cable that much. And again, we'll talk about why in a bit. But you got a nice small svelte Y-split, which I like to see. It's got a chin cinch, which doesn't really stay in place that well unless you're wearing it, which I would like it to be a little bit stiffer. But of course, it terminates in pre-curved ear hooks up here with your standard 2-pin connectors. So for whatever reason you don't like this cable, you can easily swap it out with a replacement. And we'll talk about the reason why I didn't use this cable. And it's because of this. It is a 4.4 millimeter balance cable. And that's not super uncommon. A lot of IEMs are coming now with the option to get it in 4.4 mil balanced or a 3.5 mil single-ended. What's notable here is that, as far as I can tell, the MegaFEST is not available with a single-ended cable. You have to use, well, you have to buy it with a balanced cable. And for me, that's actually kind of a bummer because I'm not really a balanced user. So as much as I actually like the behavior on this cable, the look of it especially, I think it looks really nice on this earphone. I didn't use it, and I will never probably really use it because it's a 4.4 mil balanced, and I'm not a balanced boy. If you're a balanced boy or a balanced gal, obviously that will be nice for you, but for me, left me out. Anyway, all right, so that will lead us into talking about the earpieces themselves, and we'll start with just kind of the aesthetics, which I think is a little bit, it's very much an understated look, maybe a little bit on the boring side, but I don't know. There's certainly much worse looking earpieces out there. I don't know how much this is going to come across in the camera, but this is sort of like a dark gray with a little bit of a bluish undertone to it. All right, so if you're getting a sense for it, it's not a pure black or a pure gray. There is a little bit of a blue undertone to it. The shell itself here is just a solid plastic, and this is just a solid gray. So if that's what you're seeing on the camera, that is in fact true to life, or at least true to my eyes. But yeah, the earpieces are just kind of like a general, somewhat common, but frankly pretty excellent semi-custom design. It reminds me a lot of the way that Thea Audio designs their shells, which I generally have a lot of really positive things to say about their earpieces. And I'll show you what this thing looks like in my ear in a second. But the one thing I did want to highlight is that the nozzle is slightly on the long side. Not like overly long, but if you're comparing it to some other IEMs that fit similar to this, but maybe have a more shallow fit inside the ear, this is going to fit a little bit on the deeper end. And that's why I've actually got small ear tips on this set for myself. All right, that will do it for the close-up. Let's go to my head and show you what these things look like inside my head. Give you a little fit demonstration here as I describe the comfort, which is generally very, very strong on the MegaFEST. I would say that the size of these IEMs is on the medium side, maybe even medium small on the side of small. But yeah, pretty much a medium fitting IEM. I think it will fit most people comfortably. It does have, again, kind of that semi-custom design. So it is an opinionated shape. And if it doesn't line up exactly with the folds in your ears, that could be a problem. But I'll be honest, like this general shape, I feel like I've not really heard anyone tell me that they have issues with this common shape. Like this just seems to fit a lot of people really well, not just well for comfort, but also for fit, security, and stability, which I find to be really important, which just means if I'm talking, if I'm out and about chewing food, rolling around in bed, this thing generally stays in place quite well. So yeah, really pretty happy with the fit on the IEM. Again, aesthetically, it's a little bit on the understated side, although here in my ear, it kind of looks a little gunmetal. Kind of dig it, I kind of dig it, but it's not gonna be maybe the most interesting looking IEM out there. But for some people, that's actually the good thing. So yeah, that will do it for my thoughts here on the form factor, the build quality. So we will now get into talking about the sound on the MegaFEST. And I'm gonna start by actually heading over to Squiglink, which I've got linked in the description down below as well if you wanna check it out for yourself. But over here, we've got the frequency response graph for the MegaFEST. And if you are familiar with looking at these graphs, well, this is just a really good looking graph, okay? I describe this as top tier tuning. Not only do I think this is like some of the best tuning, like this is really just almost bang on with my target, which is let me hide the MegaFEST line just briefly. This darker dotted line here, this is my ideal of a neutral sound signature. And as you can see, you lay the MegaFEST over the top of it and it's pretty much bang on. The only difference here is that there is I would say, significant bass boost in the sub-bass region. So it's all below 150 hertz. I don't think that that's gonna have much, I don't think. I've been listening to this thing for the past few weeks. It doesn't have really an impact on the perception of the lower mids because it's such a low down bass boost. But yeah, just really quite tastefully done. You can see up here, mid-range is about where I wanna see it. The treble is in line. It's not overly bright. And in fact, if anything, and now we'll get into, I guess, talking about my sound impressions of this thing, what this thing sounds like to my ear. If anything, versus how it graphs, I would say it sounds maybe a little bit, a smidge on the dark side. So it's just kind of like a generally a warm, laid back, neutral sound signature, somewhat low contrast. So if you're used to like a bright, exciting V-shaped sound signature, that is not what the MegaFEST is bringing to the table. This thing is neutral with a satisfying bass boost and a little, it's just polite up top, okay? So if you're concerned about brightness, over aggressive treble, you really don't have to worry about that here with the MegaFEST. Now, in terms of technical performance, I would say that the MegaFEST kind of is middle of the road. It's good. All right, the imaging is quite solid. There's good separation between sounds. Everything sounds positionally very distinct, which is what I like to see. And because of the bass boost that it's got here, it actually has a pretty good sense of front to back depth as well. The only thing that I will say that it's lacking a little bit is in kind of that initial incisive character, the initial attack on instruments, right? So you're talking about guitar strums, just that initial like pluck, that or even like a bass hits, even though the bass is quite well tuned. I would say that the initial leading attack on that bass is not super snappy, all right? It's well defined. It's, again, very isolated from the mid range, so it doesn't bleed or anything like that. But if you're looking for the most satisfying bass physicality, it's not really here. I would say that, again, the technical performance on the MegaFEST is solid, good, but maybe a little bit middle of the road. And that would be kind of my only complaint really here of the sound on the MegaFEST. It's just top tier tuning. It is the exact kind of sound that I can sit back and listen to all day without any fatigue. But if you're looking for kind of that last bit of excitement, the MegaFEST might not be the right pick for you. All right, so let me bring in some other IEMs for comparison. These are IEMs that I was comparing it to as I was kind of coming to these conclusions. And some of these are priced right around the MegaFEST, and some of them a little bit cheaper because, like I mentioned, this price range around $550 has not been super competitive for the past year or so. So what we've got here is the Dunu SA6 Mark II. This is an all balanced armature design. Price on this, I believe, is around $550, and this one came out last year. Here we've got the Moondrop Cross Crinacle Dusk, which just came out really recently. This is a hybrid design, so no ESTs, but it does have, what is it? Oh no, actually this is kind of technically a tribrid design because it's got balanced armatures, it's got a dynamic driver, and then it's got some like planar, micro planar drivers for the high end. Price on this guy is actually on the cheap end. This thing is $360. In fact, I think this is the cheapest one here on the table. And then here that will bring up the Yanyan Canon II, which is also a hybrid design, or maybe I shouldn't say also. That's the only hybrid on the table. It's all balanced armatures plus a dynamic driver. And price on this one, I believe, is $380. So it's in the mix. In terms of physicality, I mean, I'll let you kind of make up your own mind in terms of aesthetics and all that jazz. Personally, I would say that I think the Dusk is the best looking. The MegaFEST and the SA6 are the best fitting for my ears, and the Canon is the ugliest, and it fits okay, it fits fine, but it's probably the least secure fitting of the bunch. Now when it comes to sound signature, this is where it's kind of interesting to lay these things all out at once because they kind of run the gamut, right? I would say that the SA6 is the warmest of the bunch, right? This is the warmest, the bassiest, especially if you got the bass switch on, sound of the bunch, really kind of laid back in the vocal region, but it does also still have kind of a sparkly treble character to it. Next up, I would say, is the Yanyan Canon II. Also very much a warm, laid back sound, thicker in the bass, and not quite as sparkly in the treble. Just got this laid back, nice character to it. Next up, I would say here is the MegaFEST, which is a warm neutral. I think coming from here to here, you're getting a significant jump up in like just tonal clarity. And then finally, I would say we've got the Moondrop Crinacle Dusk. And just, I guess for context, all my descriptions of the Dusk are going to be assuming you're listening to it on the analog, because that's pretty much how I've been listening to this guy. So this is kind of like, this isn't necessarily a ranking, but this is kind of like a from warmest to brightest. The Dusk comes across as like the most clinical, kind of clean, neutral sound, whereas this is kind of the warmest, thickest sound, and you can kind of see where The MegaFEST kind of lies in the middle. In fact, the MegaFEST tonality-wise is tuned very, very similar to the Dusk when you have this on its default DSP cable, which is very interesting, but kind of neither here nor there. Now, in terms of technical performance, there's also some interesting differences here. I would say, honestly, of the bunch on the table, I would say these two are probably the most technically, or the least technically exciting of the bunch. The upper treble in this guy does give it a little bit of a zing, kind of a fun, sparkly character, which can give it kind of a nice sense of spaciousness. But the vocals, the mid-range, is a little bit on the muted side for me. The MegaFEST is not quite as sparkly, exciting, fun as the SA6 can be, but I do think that the mid-range comes across a little bit better texture and space, which is something that I appreciate about it. One thing that was actually kind of surprising to me and stood out to me, though, is that the Canon actually does a really good job with the technical performance and kind of stand out here. Even though it is warmer and more laid back than this guy, I would say that you get a better sense of texturing in the mid-range, the vocal stuff, which is the thing that stands out to me. I'm listening to like a lot of Cigarettes After Sex, Men I Trust, and The Cure, and I really think that this thing does a really standout job with the vocals. Moreover, I think the bass on this guy is actually pretty special. It's got this really powerful physicality behind it. Is it because of the biodynamics in the driver? I don't know, but it is a very satisfying bass character. So if you're looking for the most satisfying bass, this one's up there. Now, I will also pull in the Dusk and say that the bass on this thing is surprisingly fantastic. It's got that snap, it's got that initial attack and physicality behind it that the MegaFEST does lack a little bit. And I think that it also has even an added sense of resolution on top of that vocals, possibly because it's a little bit more clinical in its tune, but also I just think that whatever Moondrop's typically been doing with this design, they typically do a really good job with pulling out just that sense of transparency from vocals. And if that's what you're into, it's what I'm into. I really do think that the Dusk is kind of a step above all of the other IEMs on this table. If I were to pick between these bunch on as my only IEM, I'd probably have to pick the Dusk. As my second favorite, it would probably be the MegaFEST. But what's kind of interesting is if I'm not choosing it as my only IEM, as just like an IEM that it's like a flavor IEM, the Canon II is actually kind of a surprise winner. I wouldn't say it's necessarily my top pick, but this is one that I reached for kind of surprising. I surprised myself, okay? Just because the bass character on this thing is really fun and it does a good job with the mid-range. So that is kind of the general comparison. I think these are all standout IEMs in their own way. I would say the SA6 is probably my least favorite of the bunch, and all three of these have their own strengths and weaknesses. Although I don't, apart from this, the Dusk being a little bit on the clinical side, not really a lot of weaknesses in the Dusk, but that will, I think, do it for my thoughts here on the Hisenior Mega5-EST. Out of 5 stars, look, the tuning on this thing is fantastic. It really does not get better than the tuning that you've got here. The technical performance it does get better than the technical performance than what you get here. It's good, it's solid, it's not standout. And frankly, because of that, like I found myself just not reaching for it quite as much as I would have expected given the quality of that frequency response. It's still a fantastic IEM. Out of 5 stars, I'm gonna give this guy a very solid 4. And if you wanna check it out, of course, I got it linked in the description down below. And while you're down there, if you haven't already, please do hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, ding the YouTube bell, and I'll catch you on the next super review. Cheers.
Join with the force of reviews. We now have the tools to brave the misleading world of audio fools. Hey, this review is super, and so are you. Grab your headphones, sniff a graph, and share your thoughts in this pursuit. Let's get into the future.